Hi. So this is my Schoology page this year in the online school. So the previous example was remote teaching, the emergency e-learning of last spring, but really the main structure there was my typical class structure that had moved online. This year, my courses are entirely online, so you'll see I'm using some of those more asynchronous features of Schoology a little bit more, and just the whole layout is quite a bit different. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade right now, and you can see they have these different colors. That's more for me, really, to keep my things organized. I can keep track of 6th grade in blue, 7th grade in green, and 8th in purple. And I also do that on my calendar, which is helpful. The calendar is one area of Schoology that can be finicky. It can be kind of, it's not super easy to work with. So I find the best thing is just to create 2 weeks worth of my regularly scheduled meetings and then drag and drop those. So I've done office hours earlier this week. They'll come up again next week and then the following week, and just sort of drag and drop live lessons as well. That seems to work best on here. There's sort of a lot of that kind of thing in Schoology where there's little quirks and bugs that through use you get used to them, and are then able to find workarounds, because there's certainly a lot of things about Schoology that are buggy. Into my actual courses, I have noticed the shape of this banner. Another teacher had worked out the dimensions to get that course banner to display properly in here, and you can see it wasn't perfect. I must have messed with these a little bit, but I think they're good enough. They have the labels, and my students can all see that logo right there. So I didn't want to spend too much time messing with that. Also, the Bitmoji classroom or cartoon classroom up here at the top. This is a Google slide. And so what's nice about this is it has dynamic links. Any of these images, I can open the newsletter or the textbook that way. And I just update the slide in Google Drive and the changes will appear here. So I don't have to go through the process of embedding and resizing this every time I want to update it, which is about once a week. I'll try to get this updated for a Monday announcement. Because that's taking up my announcement space, I'm not able to pin updates the way I demonstrated in the last video. Any announcements that I make, if I were to pin one of those or one of these updates as an announcement, it would take the place of this. And I like to keep this up here. So instead, I'll post that kind of thing in the little speech bubble or on the chalkboard. But these updates are still useful because they'll go out as notifications to my students. As for my content folders in social studies this year, I showed in the last video with my in-person classroom, everything was organized according to units, and I really liked having those unit banner images. But for the fully remote setting, it sort of makes more sense to do this weekly, similarly to how we do in Canvas. So we have each week, and they follow a pretty typical format. But the color coding I do here relates to the timeliness. So our current week is week 28. That's green. Last week is yellow. That work is late, but I'm not penalizing it yet. And in fact, Journey is a self-paced school, so there really isn't a lasting penalty on late work. By the time it's 3 weeks old, that's when I'll mark it missing. So it's affecting grades, but students can still submit that old work. And so you see we have the whole semester of old folders that students could go back and do. We have the recent work, and students who are on track might see, oh, this thing's gonna be marked missing at the end of the week. Here's our current week, and then I'll publish this tomorrow. I like to publish next week's work on Friday, and I'll keep that blue so that students know they can work ahead and get started on that. They'll just be a little ahead of the game in that way. So I find that color coding helpful for me and for the students. One thing that's real nice that I hadn't really used before is called student completion requirement. So you'll see these all say must complete. If I open it up, then I can see for each of the specific items, must view the assignments, must submit their notes to reading expectations. They need to score at least a 7 on each of the assessments in order for this folder to be marked as complete. So if a student scores a 6 on the quiz out of 10, the folder won't show up as complete for them until they go back and take a second attempt and get over at least a 7 on that. Here's how it looks in practice to set those up. One little quirk with that is when you do this, it eliminates due dates, which works for us in our asynchronous setting. Once you create a student completion, you're sort of setting that up as an asynchronous thing rather than a due date. You can go back. There's kind of a workaround. You can go back and add due dates if you want to sort of have both going on. It's not too hard in the grade. I can't pull up my grade book because it has all my students' information, but you would do a bulk edit and then you can put those due dates back in there if that's something you wanted to do. So I've switched over to student view here. This is something, in my experience, every learning management system I've encountered has this option in some form. I know Canvas and Moodle and of course Schoology do. So I can see what it looks like for a student. It's kind of nice in Schoology. I can see what it looks like for a particular student. So I entered a student's name here, and I can see that this kiddo is seeing complete, but hasn't completed week 26 or 25. And I can open those up. I'm able to see this information from the teacher side as well, the completion information, but it's just helpful to kind of see from his point of view what he's seeing. So he hasn't submitted something to this assignment, so the folder's not marked as complete. So next time I get this guy in interventions or office hours, I might bring that up to him. Another thing I'd like to point out real quick, it does have its own bugs sometimes. I've had weeks where Schoology and Google don't communicate very well, but for the most part, creating an assignment with Google Slides or Google Docs in Schoology works pretty well. And what's nice is that I will link a Google slide. You can see this Google slide presentation, Inca Investigations, and then it creates a copy of that for every student. So I'll have to do a little bit of blurring here, but they each get a copy of this that they can type on. They can do it right within Schoology. If they open this up, the slide will come up embedded and they can just complete the assignment right there, or they can hit open and pull this up in Google Slides. I'm also able to see these from my Drive side of things. They sort of, there's a backdoor through the Drive to get into each of their assignments and make annotations or comments. And those things, can be really helpful. So this has been new for me this year, this integration of Google on Schoology, and I find it really useful for the remote asynchronous environment. However, I'll point out again, there have been some issues. There have been weeks where just Schoology and Google weren't communicating at all, and these things wouldn't show up, and it created kind of a pain because I had built up this reliance on Google through Schoology, and then having to sort of reteach some new expectations about how to do these things in a different way. And then finally, Schoology has these badges, which I think is something catching on in a lot of learning management systems. I think it's sort of like a mobile game kind of setup where you do certain things, you get a little achievement. And this is kind of the I would think that students would really buy into this, and a lot of students do, with their interest in gaming and badges and achievements in video games. It's just sort of hard to bridge that to completing schoolwork. It doesn't hold the same heft, but some students are into it and do pay close attention to that. So you can make your own badges. There are some default badges that Schoology has. I think this is kind of something to keep an eye on in learning management systems. I have a sense that at some point somebody's going to sort of crack the code on how to make this work really effectively. Schoology's is pretty basic and straightforward, but I expect to see this area of online learning management systems develop in the future. And finally, I've worked with several learning management systems as a student. I came through college. We were just getting started with Blackboard, and then I've taught through kind of piecemeal things like Shobi and Class Dojo that each do a little piece of a learning management system. I've used Moodle, and more recently Schoology, where I've really dug deep to learn how it all works. And Schoology is probably the most robust of all these that I've used but it's not without its problems. There are a lot of issues on Schoology that will drive you crazy. And I think that's the case for all of these learning management systems. It's part of why we're interested in this role of teachers as consultants, because oddly enough, the teachers are the main customers for these things, but then we have a really hard time getting developers to make some of the changes we're looking for. It's been 3 years that I and several other teachers have asked for a fix to this particular issue, which is that assignments marked missing. You'll see these little orange circles or hexagons for assignments marked missing. There's no good process. If a student submits that assignment, I don't get a notification. I don't get anything showing up here in my ungraded assignments. Schoology reads that missing flag as a grade, and so it doesn't recognize that as an ungraded assignment. Instead, what I'm having to do is every day I click view and find marked missing with submission, and then still at that point I've highlighted it, but now I have to scroll through my grade book and locate that assignment that's missing with a submission. I know this drives a lot of teachers crazy with Schoology. It's been one of the main obstacles as we rolled out Schoology at my school to get teachers on board with using the gradebook. A lot of my teachers would just say, well, I'm just going to put my grades in Infinite Campus then and not use the Schoology gradebook because of this issue. Same with like resubmissions of work, especially assessments. So the way our course is set up, we have these weekly comprehension checks, written assessments, and students have 3 attempts. But if they've submitted 1 attempt, I'll get that notification. But if they resubmit, I don't get any information about that. And so every day I do my grade sweeps and I click on week 18 comprehension check, week 19 comprehension check, and I have to go in here and see if there's anything ungraded. And so I'm having to do that for every assignment, which in a self-paced environment is really time consuming because it means I'm going through everything every day.